Uh, Hello and good evening. This is Jeff with Breaking News. Today's date is the 20th of July 2018. It's 8 o'clock. And tonight we have some interesting news, which I'm going to pass over to my guest to report on. On the show tonight, we've got my guest, Benjamin Jenkins of Nye Bevan News, is here to tell us about something that's been going on, something corrupt and untowards and a bit unsavoury and insidious in the Labour Party. So I'm going to pass it over directly to our guest, Benjamin. Hi, Benjamin. How are you?
Hello. I'm very well, thank you. And thank you for getting this organised in no time at all at absolutely the most ridiculous short notice. And thank you to PJ as well for setting it up. And in inverted commas, Joe Vlogs for facilitating us all in that. And the Daily Chaos for starting us off on this, but then they didn't do their show tonight. So we're doing it here instead.
Well, can we start off the show by telling people who you are and you know what sort of things you do, and what's your passion, and you know.
Yeah, I started off putting up clips on social media of Parliament because I noticed there weren't any, and this is about 4 years ago when Facebook first introduced their video function. And to counter a lot of the false stuff that gets said in the print press and then gets disseminated out on the news, you can actually undermine that stuff at source by showing clips of Parliament, whether it be the Houses of Parliament or the European inverted commas Parliament or the American Congress over there. You can show things as they are for real. And there was this thing that Jeremy Corbyn was a useless parliamentarian, and on certain topics, for example, the Iraq War or other issues like that, I, as an old left winger, you know, I saw eye to eye with him on that, and so I put that content out, and it would go viral. And then I started covering things like Question Time on channel on BBC One at 11:30 on a Thursday, or Prime Minister's questions and things like that. And my clips of Question Time started getting more views of the BBC's clips of Question Time, which, of course, is a bit of a problem for them. Sorry. Yeah. So then I set up a news organisation called Nye Bevan News, which outperforms the Momentum social media feeds by a factor of 8 during the 2017.
For our viewers, could you tell us who Nye Bevan is?
Nye Bevan was the founder of the NHS, and so I've set up the feed to remind people that the National Health Service was their inheritance. Their parents and their grandparents had built it for them, not just for the generation after us to be sold. It was built for all of us forever, and it's a national health service. It's a very important point. And Nye Bevan, when he launched the NHS, he said it was an act of real socialism and real Christianity too. And I always felt like the Labour Party forgot about that second part.
Excellent.
Which and I wanted to underline that those old Labour values, that this wasn't built for nothing and it wasn't built to be sold. It was built to be kept. And it was supposed to be run and managed reasonably as a national health service.
Right. Okay, thanks for that, Benjamin. And so it was free at the point of use. It is, and Nye Bevan was, I believe, a Labour Prime Minister going back a long time.
Not Prime Minister. He was the Health Secretary. He nearly became Foreign Secretary, but then he resigned when they introduced. He resigned from the Labour front bench when they tried charging the English for prescription charges way back when in the 1950s.
But he was in the Labour Party.
Yes, he was actually the leader of the Labour faction, which campaigned for Winston Churchill to become Prime Minister during World War II. He was also suspended from the Labour Party for championing an anti-fascist platform during the 1930s, which included prominent Tories. Okay. So he had a bit of a past. He's famous for saying the Tories are lower than vermin, because they consigned millions of first-class people to penury. But there was a bit more nuance to him than that.
Okay, thank you for that, Benjamin. Right, so tonight you're here to tell us about something that's going on within the Labour ranks, and something a bit insidious that many voters are unaware of, and they are basically being hoodwinked by the Labour Party. And I'm not going to give away too much now, because
I see your point,
Benjamin. I'm going to.
That's my opinion. I think that they're being hoodwinked, and I don't think we should prejudice your listeners' judgment on it. So I'll just lay out everything I know. And
okay, then we'll keep it neutral. We'll not say they're being hoodwinked.
I think
it's for our viewers to draw their own conclusions to the news that Benjamin is about to give you. And so now I'm going to pass over the floor to our guest, Benjamin Jenkins, who's going to impart this information for you to do your due diligence and find out about for yourselves, and question anything.
Right, so you're aware, there's a large faction of the Labour Party which are actually actively trying to stop Brexit, whether it be by having a so-called people's vote, which would in fact be an establishment vote because the people have already had their vote, or by muddying the water and accusing the Leave campaign of fraudulent spending, when in fact the Remain campaign used £8 million of public money to give out one opinion. And there's a large truth to that, especially in the Labour Party. But the problem is that 2/3 of Labour constituencies voted to leave, as did 3/4 of Tory constituencies. And extrapolated as a general election in a first-past-the-post system, the Leave vote won 408 of the 650 seats. That leaves 242 for the Remainers. So the notion and the myth that this was somehow a close-run thing has been propagated from the very beginning, and it is entirely false.
Right, so what you're saying then, basically, like me, because I believed that the Leave Party was full of, I believe, probably wrongly, that the Leave Party, the Labour Party, were mainly were composed mainly of Remain MPs. So yeah. I basically got that wrong then, yeah?
Well, the membership is about, I think, 70-30 split pro-Remain. The Parliamentary Labour Party is like 90% pro-Remain. But the problem is that Labour voters in 3/4 of their constituencies, 2/3 of their constituencies and 3/4 of the Tories' constituencies voted to leave. And in those most marginal seats, if the Labour Party had gained a few thousand extra votes in the most marginal of seats, the Labour Party would have formed the next government. That was one of the myths that was formed, that it was a close-run thing. Another one is that it somehow threatens the Northern Ireland peace agreement, which it does not. The DUP deal. The second the Tories took the DUP into government, the Northern Ireland agreement was breached, because any party which is subject to the Northern Ireland agreement and sits in Stormont cannot be part of the British government. Gordon Brown found this when he tried to cling to power in 2010. And so that is another myth, that somehow it is Britain's fault that this hard border would be put up. If the EU want a hard border, it is entirely up to them to build and police it. We won't. We are free traders. And so that these myths have been propagated by an organisation called, this is a side point, the Labour Party Irish Society, which is steered by the Progress Group of the Labour Party. The Progress Group work with the group I'm going to talk about today called Labour Future. And these two groups are like Blair's version of Momentum, only without the members. They're largely apparatchiks, a few hundred at most. And what they do is that they propagate these narratives with their friends in the media and other such things. But the problem is that 4 days ago, I applied for the job as digital strategist running social media feeds for the Labour Leave side of the Labour Party. And the man who refused to give me the job, at first I was accepted for the job, and then 4 days later I was refused the job, and the person who refused me the job came from Labour Future, which means that the Labour Leave social media strategy is being run by people who want to stop Brexit. Another thing happened today was that the wording in the response from the Labour Party to Theresa May's Northern Ireland speech was that Labour's policy was that we should always stay in the customs union. Right? That is a change. Up until today, the Labour policy has been we should form a customs union, implying there's going to be a new arrangement to accept the new situation that comes as a direct consequence of the democratic process of Brexit. And what we are seeing here is a series of things which point to the fact that the Labour Party are going to stop Brexit. And I think every Leave voter in the 408 seats that voted to leave should know this fact before voting in any upcoming general election. Oh, no way. Hello? Oh, no.
Yeah,
Did you hear? What about me?
Yeah, your stream's all right. The stream's still live at the minute. We have lost his host. He will be back. Just
cool. So the problem with this is that, of course, if you look at the strategy that's gone out on social media, which is a very important part of the political process since about 2014 onwards, the Labour Leave strategy has been horrendous. It's almost been geared towards annoying Leave voters and trying to make them not vote for Labour. And when you look at who's deciding who gets to run those feeds, given that they are part of a Remainer faction of the Labour Party, it suggests to me that you've got Remainers running the social media strategy for the Leave part of the Labour Party. And of course, my job offer was withdrawn, and the job offer itself was a little bit dodgy because it included strange stipulations, like they wanted to pay me direct through PayPal, which suggests they don't want me to be on the books. So all of this comes together and makes me think, why have they got somebody? I compared the traffic between the feeds that I run and the Labour Leave feed, and I outperform them by a factor of 15. Even though I don't have any of their funding, I don't have an office with loads of computers in it. I go from around my friends' houses, borrowing Wi-Fi and whatnot. And yet I outperform their feed. So why are they employing someone who is demonstrably worse at their job than someone else who wants that job? And I would suggest that it's because the people who are running the Labour Leave campaign don't in fact want to leave the European Union. They want to have Leave voters listen to them so that they can subtly try and change their mind and soften their position on upholding the democratic vote of Brexit. Because ever since the democratic vote came through, the way it's been treated is like some sort of catastrophe that needs to be managed, not an opportunity that needs to be taken. And it is an opportunity that needs to be taken. The Common Agricultural Policy is a direct consequence of the result that it's designed to support inefficient French farmers, starves Africans and starves the developing world and makes it so that the developing world cannot trade fairly. If they could, those countries which are incredibly poor wouldn't be so poor. They would be quite a long way along the agrarian point of a national economy's development. But the European Union has purposefully suppressed the development of those nations so that it can prop up French farmers. And this is evidenced by the fact that when the Common Agricultural Policy was formed, way back when there were only 6 members, France got 25% of the subsidy. And yet today, there are 28 members of the European Union, and France still gets 22% of the Common Agricultural Policy subsidy, despite the fact that Poland has more farmers. And what all of this proves is that the European Union, it was designed as a way of funneling German economic might away from military means, whilst propping up the French on the world stage. They came to a rather good arrangement, and it has nothing to do with us. As Churchill once said, we are with Europe, but we are not of Europe. We never have been. We are where people from Europe come to when they want to get away from Europe. And if we are stopped from being that, when Europe inevitably turns totalitarian again, which many people would be able to provide evidence to suggest it already is, and which in the future it could quite well become very, very much more totalitarian, this is the place that always needs to be there, free, so that people can be free, and so that inevitably Europe can be liberated again, because that has been the waxing and waning of it ever since the days of Rome and the collapse of the Roman Empire. People came here back then to stay away from the chaos that was on the continent, and the continent will continue to split into chaos because either one person rules that continent or nobody does, and Europe will forever be trapped, oscillating between those two extremes, and it's nothing to do with us until they start rounding each other up, putting each other in camps, and gassing each other. You know, when things get that bad, that's when we hopefully intervene before it gets to there. But sorry, yes. Oh, you're back. Hello.
Just interject. Yeah, we've got Jeff back.
I do apologise for that, folks. I had some technical issues. I actually had a power cut. I think they're out to get us, to shut us down. I don't know what's going. I've never had a power cut in years, in absolutely years. And
well, you know, there coincidences exist supposedly.
Yeah,
supposedly. Yeah, I think what my advice to anyone listening to this is, I want them to disseminate this information, which is the nub of it is if the Labour Leave part of the Labour Party really wants to leave the European Union, why are they making it so that Remainers and people from Remainer factions of the Labour Party decide who gets to run their social media feeds? And why have they changed the language on the customs union? And why is Jeremy Corbyn, who is supposed to be a Tony Bennite and is one of the most vocal advocates for leaving the European Union, so silent on the benefits that will come from leaving the European Union? Oh dear.
Right, well, I've sort of missed out a bit of what was going on because, unfortunately, I had that.
I expanded on all of the things I said to you before the feed.
Right. So you've explained about the Leave Labour camp and what they're doing.
Yes,
you've already expanded on that. Okay, thank you for that.
And the advice I'd give people who support Leave is that at the next general election, whenever it comes, you're going to have to vote for candidates who you can trust will uphold the democratic vote that you carried out in 2016. Because anyone else is going to work to undo what you chose on that day. And having a democracy is a lot like having a successful marriage. And if you cheat on the marriage, it will destroy the marriage. And by the same token, if we allow them to cheat on democracy, we will never get it back again. And that means a lot of people might have to hold their nose and vote for people they would never have imagined themselves voting for before, whether it be them coming from the right to vote for people who they feel are too left-wing, or indeed the other way round. Because democracy is more important than all of it. Because it doesn't matter if you're healthy and you've got an NHS, if you live in a fascist hotel.
How would that work exactly?
You need to create websites which collate the candidates, show what they vote for and what they believe in.
Clarify, Benjamin. What I want to clarify is, so are you talking about in the event of the next general election?
There is a general election coming. I don't know if you've noticed all the anti-Semitism smears against Jeremy Corbyn, but that suggests that the Blairite faction of the Labour Party are scared that there's going to be another election and that they're going to have to go out and campaign for Corbyn again, which they actually absolutely cannot stand doing.
Right, so when you literally, what I'm trying to establish is when you literally go, I mean, I go down to, say for example, I was to go down to my local polling station on a general election vote. So on the ballot paper, you usually get a list of one person representing each party, don't you? Yeah.
Yes.
So basically, if there are Remain, any of them that are Remain, ignore them.
You cannot vote for anyone who you might even suspect would betray you about going to Remain. You have to vote for the only thing that you can be sure of will get you Brexit. So there are a few Labour MPs who you could vote for who will definitely bring you Brexit. Whether they be true Brexiteers or ones who have always made public pronouncements saying the democratic vote must be respected, we are going down a dangerous path if we try and undo it. Yeah, you want to vote for them? Vote for them.
And so what you're saying, and to clarify, is don't worry about whatever party it is.
Yes.
Pick one of the candidates that you definitely know to be pro-Brexit to get us out. Basically, regardless of political party or affiliation, just pick one that is definitely without a shadow of pro-Brexit. And anybody that's Remain, if you've only got Remain candidates on your list, then don't bother voting.
No, don't bother voting. You need people who care about this, because this is you'll get one chance to save your democracy, and it's this electoral cycle.
What I'm saying is if you've got a list of candidates, say you've got...
Well, let me finish the point I was just about to make, is find out what the candidates who put themselves up are. If you see that there isn't a real Brexit candidate, find out who the people who support Brexit in your area are and put up a candidate. Make sure we have a Brexit person to vote for in each seat, because even if you do not win that seat, you will stop somebody else from winning it. Okay? And that's what this is about. It's about we smashed the table once before in 2016, and it is about smashing the table again, because they are not listening. They are doing everything they can possibly do to undo that plebiscite. And 17.4 million voters is more people than have voted for anything in the entire democratic history of these islands. And to fly in the face of it would destroy democracy on these islands. We will never get it back. It's that important. This isn't hyperbole. They've had 2 years to come up with something. They came up with checkers. We got angry for 2 days. We nearly brought down a government. We need to carry on thinking like that. Because if we let up at all, we will lose this fight. They are not going to stop trying to stop us. They are not going to stop trying to stop Brexit. They will keep going and going and going and going, as they have done for 40 years. And it'll be 140 years before we bring it back. And it will cost us so much more than we should have to spend. We've already voted once.
I think that's excellent advice, Benjamin. So basically, if you go down, if we get another general election, go down and vote for pro-Brexit candidates, ones that you know that are absolutely against the European Union and want to see the European Union stuffed, which is what we'd all like to see, I think, anybody who's a true patriot of this country.
No, I don't necessarily think that we must think that the European Union has to fail. But the reason the European Union has to fail is because when you look at what it's doing to its own citizens, that is totalitarianism, and that is why it must come down. The way you word it there, it would be very easy for these manipulative Remainers to paint you as some sort of Brextremist, as they put it, or Brexiter. You are not. You are an Anglo-Saxon who understands English democracy and how important it is.
I believe in the fact that we should have a voice, and if the only way to have a voice is through democracy, then we're only going to get it from getting our country back and being an independent nation, because we certainly won't have any form of democracy within the EU, because everything's decided, by Brussels bureaucrats. Unelected, basically appointed Brussels bureaucrats, and so
this is with respect. None of this has anything to do with them anymore. Yeah. This is now about people who are in our system, who are by their actions day in day out more loyal to a foreign government than they are to ours and to this country, and we have laws for that. Every November 5th. We have a day that reminds everybody what happened to the last person who tried to sell British democracy out to the continent. And they need to be reminded that this is that important. This is that important.
What surprises me is that nobody in the mainstream, they're only just in the mainstream starting to talk about treason. Now, if we go back to Edward Heath, where he pulled the wool over the people's eyes and said, there'll be no loss of national sovereignty, which turned out to be a complete and utter lie.
Back when Enoch Powell and Harold Wilson met in a toilet in Parliament and decided to save British democracy. That's what happened. That they were the ones who did that to Heath.
Yeah.
And that is what needs to happen again. That faction of British politics, which many would say is now led by people like Nigel Farage, I would say it would be more realistic to say someone like Tommy Robinson, and the faction which is led by Jeremy Corbyn. They're supposed to be the ones that stand up to this. And what's happened is that one of them isn't. And Tony Benn would be weeping to see what's happening here. To see his protege, Jeremy Corbyn, sell Brexit out like this would be one of the worst things he would. I'm glad he died and didn't have to see it. Because as a socialist and a left-winger, right, all of the things that have happened for the last, and someone who's anti-EU, everything that's happened in the last 4 years, I've thought has been good, right? It's signs that things are changing and we're going to make some real changes so that we can put this country back on track again. Yeah. And I know a lot of people who I'm going to be speaking to and who are going to be listening to this think that's a ridiculous notion. But if nationalised industries aren't good, how is it that the French and the Germans are doing so well out of our private market and subsidising their nationalised industries? Nationalised industries can be run well if they are run properly. And the sovereign wealth fund we should have had from the North Sea oil, which Tony Benn set up, should have been here to help us all through our days. And well managed, so that the interest was the thing that we used and the pot was the thing that we kept. And instead, it all got squandered by Thatcher and then by Blair, who was Thatcher's number two, and then by Cameron, so that the North Sea oil was used to subsidise and keep our interest rate low and to pay for redundancies and whatnot. And all of that could have been reversed. And if Tony Benn had seen that chance came up and was so close, and then what happened was that the Blairites basically got him to back down on it all, he would have wept. And he would have wept to see the Leave part of the Labour Party controlled by Remainers. And that's exactly what I've just discovered this today.
Well, I'm 54 years old, Benjamin, and I've seen a lot of things happen over the years. And quite frankly, I've seen our manufacturing base being hollowed out in this country. And everything being outsourced. I've seen our assets totally stripped in this country. I've seen it all go to rack and ruin over the years. And I think until we get back to being an independent nation and getting our productivity going again in this country, because you cannot improve your economic situation as a nation without productivity. So we've got more outgoings than we've got incomings. And what that means is our country is going down the pan. If you've got more incomings than outgoings, you build up a surplus, don't you? Right?
Well, I would, just to interject there, I would also say that the City of London does £900 billion worth of turnover of business, of trade per day. And a 1% rake on that wouldn't go amiss. We haven't stayed as the fifth or sixth greatest economy on earth, whilst our manufacturing base is completely hollowed out and bits of the country, like where I come from, end up poorer than the old communist bloc countries in Europe. That hasn't happened, and we've retained our wealth and our position on the rankings of the largest economies because we don't have anything to offer. This is one of the few places on earth that when you change a government, nobody has their property stolen, nobody gets shot, and no one goes to jail. It's one of the few places on earth where you can come from anywhere in the world, and as long as you pay your taxes and invest, and sometimes if you're rich enough, even if you don't pay your taxes, you can come here, buy your property, and no one steals it off you.
I've got
and you're protected.
A bit of a different take on it, in as much as that when we entered the EU, we were the third biggest economy in the world, and over the last 43 years, we've been demoted back down to about fifth or sixth place in the world. So
that's because other countries grew. China wasn't going to stay poor forever, right? And nor will India. But the geography of it just suggests that's an unrealistic thing to think. And no matter how much the EU tries with its trade policies to keep these countries down, it won't. Here's the big myth that the left has been sold, is that the EU is somehow defending those countries. The EU is part of the reason why those countries are so poor. it was actually better for them back when they could trade freely under Commonwealth rules, and their products were allowed to come into our markets with very little things holding them back. And that meant a lot of wealth went back there. Now, the counterpoint from the left to that would be, yes, it went back to the white settlers that we sent there to set up the colonies. But once, after decolonization, had these markets been kept open to our market, we would have 50 years now of back and forth free trade between us and countries in Africa and in the Far East. And that would have been a lot better for us than what we've got at the moment. And now, do you know what Brexit's about? Brexit's about building that stuff that we'd spent that 200 years of empire building that stuff for ourselves anyway. And what the European Union did was they made us dismantle the economic advantages we built for ourselves out of our own hard work, and yes, out of colonialization, and yes, out of exploiting people. But the corollary effect to that is that once the liberalization that came in the 20th century came and those countries became free, as they inevitably would have, because it was indecent to keep them in servitude, those links would stay. And you see that in the fact that more Jamaicans have got a picture of Her Majesty the Queen on their wall than British people do. Many Indians speak better of the Queen than we do. The Canadians chose to keep her as their head of state. And those ties, the European Union has always been about destroying those ties. And let me tell you something about the Anglophone world. The Anglophone world is 24% of the global economy. It's got an average annual wage of about £50,000. It's the most diverse culturally and ethnically. It's the most diverse religiously. It's the most liberal. It's the most tolerant. It's the best educated. It's got all of the best armies and all of the best equipment and all of the best economies and all of the best technologies. And this myth that somehow we couldn't get along quite well on our own, thank you very much, is a myth propagated by those who have always envied what we built, ever since we were building it.
That makes sense, actually.
That's what this is about. This is about the continued destruction. And what we're seeing with Brexit, and to a certain extent with Trump, use the analogy, it's an Anglophone realignment. It's English speakers saying, okay, if we're all so bad and privileged and racist, we'll do what we want to do. You guys do what you want to do, and we'll see where it all ends up. Because, the Americans are being dragged through the mud. You can say whatever you like about English people, and no one will ever call you up about being racist. And you can say whatever you like about white Americans, and no one will ever call you up for being racist. And I'll tell you why. It's because there is a distinct hatred now, a palpable hatred on the part of the people who don't come from those communities against those who do. Because it is plain as day that the Anglophone system, the freedom that comes with speaking the English language that has 140,000 words in it, the hinterlands of the mind that you're allowed to explore when you think like that, instead of in 30,000 words, is like you've got in French and German, right? The fundamental freedoms that come from as an extrapolation of that language, which are things like which is what the representation of the Witan, which is the precursor to how Parliament is, and then the fusion with all of the people that came in and mixed on the melting pot island, created something which really worked. We are the original European Union. We learned to get along on these islands and stop killing each other 600 years before the Europeans did. For them to lecture us about rights when we invented socialism. Marx came here to invent socialism. The working class union movement was invented here. We don't need to be lectured by people who don't. They didn't even have habeas corpus until the 1950s, most of them. And they presume to lecture us on what individual rights are. It's a nonsense. And all of it, the hatred that is being propagated in our own media and by our own political class against our own culture is disgusting. And it needs to stop. And what the Stop Brexit thing, it's a manifestation of all of that. Of people who they do not like the country they live in. They think that this is a bad place to live. Well, if that's the case, then they can go somewhere else, because at any other point in the history of these islands, we'd be in open civil war. And the thing is, we would have won, but they're acting like they won. And that's what all of this in Parliament has been so important. And I'll tell you what, I'm a parliamentary correspondent. I've been sitting watching this going on for the last 5 years. And these people, when those votes got lost last week, the looks on their faces, of the dawning realization of the failure that they'd gone through, the 2 years of whinging, and all of the people on their side in the media trying to bring things back the way they wanted them to be. All of it got undone in 2 days as that Chequers deal unraveled. And they made so much noise complaining, they even convinced Theresa May that maybe she could do Brexit in name only. And it took us Leavers 2 days to nearly bring her government down. And we must remember that. We must remember that the demos is with us.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for your information and input tonight, Benjamin. Before we wrap this up, I just want to see if any of our other guests on the show here, we've got John. I don't know if John would like to ask you any questions. John, are you there? Are you there, John? No? PJ, are you there? I don't know. PJ, is there anything you'd like to ask?
Is anybody there? Is there anybody out there? What album is that from? Oh, yeah, it's Pink Floyd.
Pink Floyd. That's from the Wall album.
Yeah.
One of my favourites, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it looks like that's about it. Is there anything else you'd like to input about this new bit of information that you've come across?
I was astonished by it, to be honest. I was absolutely astonished by it. When I saw that Labour Future email address CT'd in on it, I thought, oh my good Lord.
Yeah.
It is it's shocking, isn't it?
Yes.
I will quickly just say before we end the show, I mean, I'm a political party atheist, so you're not really going to get that much out of me. So what is your advice to people like me? I don't recognise EU, so really trying to vote Brexit to get out for me is a bit hypocritical, but I didn't vote, by the way. I've never voted in my life. I don't think I ever would. But give me your best shot to try and change my mind.
You're going to have to register to vote.
You've already lost me interest.
Or people who think like you, but maybe who might be convinced, I would say to them, look, the second I registered to vote, I'll tell you some other things that happened to me first as a preamble to this, because I'm very similar to you on that front, and I always have been. I got into politics protesting against the Iraq War, but I spent 5 years nursing a World War II veteran who flew 36 bombing missions over Nazi Germany, and I held his hand as he died. And he didn't vote all the time, and he wasn't very political before he flew, but he realized whilst he was there that there's a fundamental difference in the mindset between us and the continent, because
over 1 million people protested that day for that. We've got 17.4 millionaires, and what difference is it going to make?
What difference will it make? I'll tell you what difference it makes is that if they all register to vote and vote, it overloads the system. It's like a power surge. The system is designed to cope with a certain amount of voters, and it can manage them. But when you surge the system like this, it's like what happens to a computer operating system when you fry the computer with too much electricity. It just overloads the motherboard and melts it down. Well, if you want to change if you want to make sure that if you don't register to vote and help to make sure Brexit's happening, I'm guaranteeing you in 50 years' time, the limited democracy we've got at the moment will be gone.
Yeah, well, but then again, you mentioned democracy.
Your grandkids aren't going to be allowed to think clearly.
You mentioned democracy, but it's like, it's 51% versus 49, and we know who wins in that game. And is that really fair? Do you know what I mean? So I'm not.
52. It's 52 versus 48.
Yeah, it is for this. I'm just saying, democracy.
Oh, right, it's a coin.
Generally, it's 51 gets to kill 49%.
Yes, but the difference is that we've never killed them all before. This is the first time that's ever happened, where the actual, every other election we've had, when the winning side won, the losing side did actually have to accept it, move forward for that political cycle, and grind it out, right?
I'm more for a direct meritocracy.
Yes, okay, and that will evolve. Right. With the technology we've got, as long as the human beings as individuals keep control through the free market of ideas and as an extension, the free market of, you vote with your feet or with your wallet, as long as that is retained, then we will. There's a fairly good chance we'll develop to what you want there. It won't be even your lifetime, maybe, but it might be in your kids. Whereas if we allow this to happen now, that day is never coming. Not ever. It's over.
I think you make a lot of sense there, actually, Benjamin. I understand from PJ's point of view, because I've become a bit of a political atheist, but I do believe.
Well, no, I can't think you can say that you're a political atheist anymore, Jeff, because it bothers you whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
So a political party atheist, you can be, which is what I am.
Well, I mean, PJ, from my point of view, I went off the electoral register many years ago, and I haven't voted since. I used to campaign for Brexit, leaving the EU, because I believed in leaving the EU, and I thought the EU was totally corrupt, and I've been campaigning for years about that. But having said that, I didn't actually vote in the referendum because it would have meant registering to vote, and I didn't bother to do that because I'm totally disillusioned.
But there are millions of men like you on these islands who didn't do that, and we still won. And if you all turned out this time, we would smash them. It wouldn't be 70.
That is true, but
it would be 25 million to 16, and then they'd have to shut up and respect democracy, and you'd never have to vote again.
I think if it came down to it, Benjamin, that if we did have, say, for example, they did manage to wrangle it so that we got another referendum.
Oh, by the way, I also didn't vote last time. I abstained because I don't believe in referenda. I think they're un-British. Sorry.
I mean, ultimately, if it comes down to it, I probably will go back on the electoral register, although I am a bit of a political atheist, because I realise one thing now, and that is that no matter how hard they tried to overthrow us with Project Fear, it didn't bloody work. And the thing is, they told us that 52% was for Brexit and 48% was against. Well, actually, the polls showed significantly that was not the case. In fact, the polls were showing at the time about 80% were for leave, 15% only were for remain, and about 5% were undecided. So clearly there's been a lot of vote rigging going on via one means or another, and I believe they've done the same thing with the Lisbon Treaty.
Hang on a sec. Speaking of vote rigging, right? I don't know if you remember when they first, when Jeremy Corbyn first became leader of the Labour Party, they tried running against him again. It was called the chicken coup. And during that second leadership election with Owen Smith, who is as pro-Remain as possible, they actually introduced a £25 poll tax to try and price their own members out of being able to afford to vote. Now, to your man PJ there, what I would say to him is, the people who I'm reporting on today who've done this, they are the same people who did that. If they will do that to their own party members, what do you think they're going to do to you?
Yeah, I think.
Right? This is your chance to defend yourself, and you're going to get one of them. And if you don't use it and we lose, you're never going to be allowed to defend yourself again. You won't be able to say things that they disagree with because they will put you in jail for it. Sadiq Khan is more interested in people going to jail for mean tweets than he is for shanking each other on the streets. This is, so there are already sections of this fight that we are losing. The line is collapsing. This is the one bit of the line that's being held. And if this bit of the line gets held, the culture that created the mind that you use every day to think, which would not be you if you were born anywhere else. And that's just not a facetious point. You wouldn't have the freedom of thought that you have because there is something that comes with being free of thought. It's why English speakers who are born English speakers find it particularly difficult to learn other languages. It's because other languages, with all of their stupid rules and whatnot, are like a clamp on the mind of a born English speaker, because it's much smaller than if a language is an operating system that you use to think, then those other languages are like a clamp. They're like a smaller, less big operating system for you to use to think. And that's why English speakers struggle to learn other languages. And as someone who learned Welsh and English at the same time, I know in real time what that felt like, to have to squeeze between the smaller language and the bigger language. and know the freedom that came with the English language.
The funny thing is, Benjamin. I know people say that the English is an extremely difficult language to learn. Bar something like what was it, Cantonese or Mandarin Chinese. They reckon that's even more difficult to learn. But the funny thing is, my nan is Welsh. She was born in the Rhondda Valley, in Ferndale. So I'm a quarter Welsh myself, you could say. But she struggled actually with Welsh. She found it easier to learn English, but she always struggled learning Welsh for some reason. She gave up trying to learn Welsh.
In the south, they are Anglophone. You see, it's been that way for centuries. Whereas in the west and the north, they are. It's about a 40-60 split, and of that 40, 20, half of them, so 20% of the total are 100% fluent speakers, and the other 20, it's a range between, say, 99% fluent and 15-20, like workable Welsh. And it's an important language. The first draft of English history was written in Welsh. I'm not dismissing Welsh culture or nothing. I'm just saying that there's the English language is like it's like a blockchain language. It's very volatile. It still mutates. It's like it's like Bitcoin, but a language. Like no other languages grabs words the way English does. It's like DNA. It's constantly evolving and changing, whereas other languages are, they're stayed, they're turgid, they're very flat.
I think Wales is a very important part of, let's say, part of England. In fact, England was mostly Welsh. Going back, if you go back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, Wales covered most of England, believe it or not.
Yeah, and the etymological root of the word Welsh comes from the old Anglo-Saxon word Welaisc, which means slave or foreigner. So if you get some Welshman going, I'm really proud to be Welsh, I'd never call myself British. The word British comes from the old Welsh word Prydain, which means the people on the islands. And the Romans misheard it, wrote it down as Britain, and the Great comes as a geographical expression and acts in opposition to Lesser Brittany. So all of these tropes that come out, especially from the left, of we just think we're so Great Britain, and when we were Little England. It's people not understanding our history, right?
Yeah.
And that's what really annoys me about it. I identify as British, right? I'm British first, and I'm from a family where you didn't call yourself Welsh, you called yourself Gymraeg. We still don't like the word Welsh, and my grandfather laughed when they created the Welsh Assembly government, because they were like, "Oh, great, the Assembly of Foreigners." Well, boys, what good is that to me?
Sorry, did you say the proper? Did you say Cymru?
Yeah, Cymru. Yeah,
Cymru. Sorry, that's how it's pronounced. Cymru. Yeah.
It undergoes a soft mutation depending on context, and you say it with a hard G, and then in other contexts you say it with a hard C. So and that's another example of, like, the English language doesn't do that. The English language's rules are much more subtle than that, and that's why you get so many patois English tongues and dialects.
Do you know something I think is so important, that people in England and Wales really get back to learning about their culture, who they are, where they come from, their origin. It's so important, because that is what makes us us. And if we lose that, this is what I fear, is that we'll lose that culture. We'll lose our historical meanings and our roots and things, and then we'll lose our national identity, which is what the powers that be want. They want to destroy national identities across the board, everywhere, all over the world, so that they can bring in this damn new world order and have a total.
But it's terrible though, because it's really bad for. So, for example, the Anglophone world isn't just us on these islands, and it isn't just those on the North American continent. The Anglophone world, it includes the Caribbean islands, India, the subcontinent, Australia. There's so many places that speak English, and then you've got it as the language of business, so that there are so many subsections of other people's societies which use day-to-day English. And so for us to just throw that baby out with the bathwater, it just seems so silly to me. And
so much to be proud of. what we've given the world over the years and things like that.
Yes, you need to stop being ashamed or not being ashamed, allowing people to shame you.
Yeah.
As a nation, my advice to the English, right, and not just the Anglo-Saxons, because there are many people who identify as English, and this is kind of the point I'm trying to make, is like the English have never been very restrictive about letting in people to the idea of being English, provided you're willing to obey. I think it's 4 rules. Don't be rude in the street, pay your taxes, don't stick your nose into other people's business, and don't try and tell people what to think or say. I think those are only, you can boil down pretty much all of English law into those 4 things. And anyone who's willing to abide by that has been welcome in the society and has become part of the society, which is precisely why we've got Jewish communities. That's precisely why we've got Muslim communities. That's precisely why we've got non-white communities, is because this is a place they can come and be free. And the reason they can be free is because of the way that the Englishness works. And so if we allow the manipulation of politics, whether it be from the right or the left, to undermine that fundamental rule, all of those communities, they'll be the first to go.
Yeah, but quickly, but what can you tell me about the European Free Alliance? Or have you not heard of it?
The European Free Alliance?
Yeah.
Is that a parliamentary group?
I'm not going to say no more. I just wondered what you knew on it, if you're aware of it.
No, my opposition to the European Union is a historical thing. So, like, I followed it from the point of view of the left and of socialism and the fact that it's anti-democratic. And after the reforms in 1987 of the single market, as crystallized in Margaret Thatcher's Mansion House speech, pretty much enshrined it as a system that was going to make it very hard for Britain to prosper, or at least for the British people to prosper. The sections of our economy would be allowed to prosper, and then those profits would be hived off and sent out elsewhere, or would be parked as wealth. But no, I'm not. It would be wrong of me to say that I'm like an expert in that sense. To me, this is a point of principle. It's about we've always had quite limited democracy on these islands, and it's about I want that democracy to be less limited. I want to expand democracy into the definition you were talking about earlier, and we're never going to get to that.
Right. So basically, to bottom line it, if we allow this atrocity that's taking place against the will of the British people, then we will lose democracy.
Yeah,
and once it's gone for good.
Yeah.
But
if you tolerated this, then your children will be next, basically.
Right. Well,
and I do not know. I'm sorry, your man asked me a question and I didn't answer it. I'm going to condense that answer I gave you into no. I do not know who those people are. There you go.
Well, go. My suggestion is to have a look at it after the show and just try and convince me that that's not a backdoor to EU anyway.
Yeah, no, well, we're not. I don't want to do any of it. The European Economic Area, we shouldn't be in it. We shouldn't be in a customs union. We shouldn't be in the single market. We shouldn't be under the ECJ. Well, none of these things. None of them. We should go out on world.
The CFA is something kind of different, but yeah. Anyway, back over to you, Jeff.
Okay, thanks, guys. Well, I think clearly, Benjamin. Thank you for your input as well, PJ, and for helping with the show tonight. I do appreciate that. And thank you very much to our main guest.
Vote Brexit. Anyone who's listening to this, make sure you research who it is you're voting for when the general election comes, and you treat it like they've dared to ask you about the referendum again, and you vote hard for Brexit. You vote for only people who are going to bring Brexit, and it'll surge the electoral system in a way that we surged it in 2016, because they're not going to listen. And I do take PJ's point's really important. The people who are intelligent enough to see through the nonsense and the spin and that, they must be so sick of all of this. And to ask them to register to vote to do it again is a big ask. But it's.
I've been seeing all this stuff going on for over 2 years now. I mean, it was June the 23rd, 2016, and then they said, well, we'll trigger Article 50 by March the 29th. Then they waited right up to the last moment, which was March the 29th, to trigger Article 50. Then they've said, well, it takes 2 years from then, and then you've got transition periods for different things. On top of that, it's like, when is this going to end? This is a nightmare.
Well, the whole notion, the language of it, right, of crashing out on World Trade Organization rules, as if the vast majority of the trade that we do, which is under World Trade Organization rules, is this chaotic Mad Max Wild West world, when it isn't. So it's not crashing out. And then the softer version of that is default. We'll default to World Trade Organization rules. And that's what they started off saying at the beginning. And then they scrapped that word in because it wasn't dramatic enough.
I think
all of this is propaganda.
Yeah, I think over the years, the World Trade Organization rules have been simplified as well. So I think it's less regulation. It's more in line with true free market capitalism rather than the crony capitalistic vision of the European Union. So I think it's, if anything, it's a good thing. I think, you know, a no deal to me would be heaven.
On the basis of no deal as well, it was them who said nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. They need £40 billion off us so that their financial budgeting up until 2019 doesn't go collapse.
So
because the markets would turn on them if that happened, right?
Yeah.
That means, and also all of their financial future planning, which they're always looking 10, 20, 30 years ahead. What we're seeing here is the bitterness of the people who were thinking that British money was going to be plowing into this thing for the next 30 years. We're seeing the manifestation of the bitterness and the realization that their purse is going to be pinched, because the only people who can fill that budgetary gap, the only ones who can afford it, are the Germans. And the Germans just elected a bunch of neo-Nazis to become, as the left put it, a bunch of neo-Nazis to become the second largest party in the Bundestag, because the German electorate are sick of this as well. And then what I feel really sorry about with the German electorate is they've never had a plebiscite on their membership of the EU. Well, so if you think English people and British people are annoyed about how this is going and about being in it for 40 years because of Heath with no questions asked, and then it developing into a political organisation after it being sold as an economic organisation.
Well, we didn't get a plebiscite on the Lisbon Treaty in England. It was given to the Irish. Our vote was given to the Irish to vote.
Yeah. Well, and they voted wrong and they got told to vote again.
That's right. They said they give them a distinct no, and they said vote again, and then they said no again, I believe, a second time. And then they got them to vote again, and in the end they caved in to the European Union. This is
if we allow that to happen, that's it. Yeah. The history of these islands stops at that point. Absolutely. and we get folded into a wider history, which will be written in a language that you don't speak, either French, German, or some other such. It won't be. We will not be writing our own story anymore. That's what this is about. It's that important, and that's why your man PJ needs to register to vote and vote for Brexit. If that's not even vote for Brexit, vote for future generations to have the right to vote. That's what you're voting for. This isn't even about Brexit anymore. This is about making sure that the democratic principle doesn't get completely undermined.
I might well do that myself, Benjamin, because I'm not on the electoral register. But I think if we're going to save democracy and expand on it, we first have to save on it before we can expand on it. So. Anyway, I'm going to
with hope. If I've changed your mind on this, that fills me with hope. I might be able to change other people's mind.
Well, I think it's important that we can expand on it and bring in a system where the people have got more of a voice than they've ever had. At the moment, all we get to do is choose the nature of our devil, if you like, which is our representative.
Yeah, they're taking that office though. We're not even going to be able to pick the lesser evil anymore, mate. That's the problem.
We can't even pick the lesser evil. Well, you know, I mean, yeah, it's not much as what we've got at the moment, but we can't expand on it unless we keep it. So I understand where you're coming from exactly, Benjamin. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up.
Mate, if it comes down to it, there might come a point where, as protesters, they need to be locked in that parliament until, instead of them asking us to vote again.
Yeah. Completely
the wrong way around. There might need to come a point where we make them vote again, and we say to them, no, you're not coming out of there. That's our parliament. You're there. We've lent you our powers to go into that building. It's not for you to give those powers away. You go back in that building and you vote again. we're not voting again. You vote again.
Exactly. That's what we should be doing, is impressing upon them that they are our public servants and not the other way around, and that they got to vote how we tell them to bloody vote. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a good point. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up this show tonight. I think
I just want to say thank you so much, guys. I can't believe you pulled this together after 5-10 minutes, especially PJ. Literally drop of a hat. Legend.
Thanks for coming on.
No problem. Thanks very much, PJ, man. Very much appreciated. Same with you, Jeff, and also to the old Joe Blogs in the background.
Pleasure having you on our
Peter Mandelson impression.
It's been a pleasure having you on our emergency broadcast.